I remember the night I broke down completely. I was sitting in my car in the middle of a Walmart parking lot, clutching the steering wheel as tears poured down my face. Everything I thought I had built in life, my career, my home, my dignity, was gone. The seats around me were piled with clothes stuffed in garbage bags, the last pieces of the life I once had. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel and whispered through sobs, "God, why me? Where are you now?" The darkness inside that car felt like it was swallowing me whole. Before I continue, I want to pause and thank each one of you for being here today. To my returning subscribers, you are the heartbeat of this channel. To all the new viewers who are yet to subscribe, I want you to know how much I appreciate you stopping by. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button because your support is the fuel and energy that keeps this channel alive. Please share your thoughts in the comments, because your voice matters here. Now let me take you back to the beginning of my journey. My name is Sarah. I am a 36-year-old woman living in Ohio. For most of my life, I believed I had things under control. I had a good job working as an office administrator at a mid-sized company. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I was proud of how far I had come. I lived in a modest but cozy apartment, had a small circle of friends from church, and my faith was steady. Every Sunday I sang hymns with joy, thanking God for His blessings. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. It started with whispers around the office, rumors of budget cuts, layoffs, and restructuring. I tried not to worry, telling myself that God had always taken care of me. But one Friday morning, my manager called me into his office. I sat across from him, my hands trembling, as he explained that my position was being eliminated. My heart sank. I asked if there was anything else I could do, any role I could take. He shook his head. The decision was final. Walking out of that building for the last time felt surreal. The place I had given my energy and loyalty suddenly had no space for me. I remember driving home in silence, the radio turned off, my mind racing with questions. How would I pay rent? How would I survive? I prayed out loud, "Lord, please do not let me fall." At first, I tried to stay positive. I filled out applications, sent resumes, went to interviews. But days turned into weeks, and rejection emails filled my inbox. My savings began to dwindle. The bills stacked up. My landlord left polite reminders at first, then firm notices. I sold my furniture piece by piece to buy groceries. The weight of it all grew heavier when the eviction notice finally came. I had nowhere to go. I called friends, hoping someone would open their door. A few answered kindly, but their excuses were clear: they had families, they had no space, they were sorry. Others stopped answering altogether. The people who once laughed with me after church suddenly disappeared when I needed them most. The night I packed my belongings into trash bags and stuffed them into my car, I felt like a stranger in my own life. Everything smelled of loss. As I sat there, staring at the empty apartment one last time, I whispered, "This cannot be happening." But it was. Living out of my car was humiliating. I parked in safe places, Walmart parking lots, church lots, side streets, and prayed no one would notice me. I showered at the gym when I could, and when I could not, I used public restrooms to clean up as best as I could. My diet became cheap fast food and whatever I could get from food pantries. Nights were the worst. The silence of the car reminded me of everything I had lost. I wrestled with God. I pounded my fists against the steering wheel. I shouted at the roof of my car. Why would you let this happen? I served you. I trusted you. I did everything right, and still you abandoned me. But even in my anger, I could not let go of him completely. Every night before I tried to sleep, I would still whisper, "Lord, please do not leave me." My faith felt like a tiny flame, flickering, almost gone, but not extinguished. The lowest point came one night when the cold seeped through my car windows, and I curled under a thin blanket, shivering. I felt so alone, so invisible. I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out my Bible, the one I had carried since college. I opened it at random, and my eyes landed on Psalm 34 verse 18, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Tears flooded my eyes again, but this time they were different. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. I felt like maybe, just maybe, God had not left me after all. Still, I was at rock bottom. This was the beginning of my darkest valley. I had lost my job, my home, and my hope. But somehow, I still had faith. And that faith, fragile as it was about to carry me into the next chapter of my journey. Chapter 2, The Struggle. The days after losing everything blurred together. I stopped keeping track of the calendar because time no longer felt the same when you had no job to go to, no home to return to, and no real plan for tomorrow. My car became my world. The back seat was my closet, the front seat my bed, and the trunk my storage. I told myself it was temporary, but the weeks dragged on and nothing seemed to change. It was in this season that I learned survival was not only about food and shelter, it was about dignity. Every morning I would look at myself in the rearview mirror, my hair matted, my eyes swollen from crying, and I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. I felt stripped down, exposed, like all the layers of my life had been peeled away. I spent a lot of time in libraries just to be indoors, to charge my phone, and to fill out more job applications. The rejection emails continued to pour in. Each one felt like another door slamming in my face. One evening, I sat at a corner table with my laptop and whispered under my breath, "Lord, are you closing every door because there is something I cannot see? Or are you simply letting me fall?" At times, the temptation to give up completely was strong. I would drive past bars where laughter spilled out into the streets, and I wondered what it would feel like to drown my pain in alcohol, even just for a night. I thought about calling an old boyfriend who once told me he would take care of me if I ever needed him. But I knew what his kind of help meant, and deep inside, I could not sell my soul for shelter. I even thought about leaving town completely, disappearing, and starting over somewhere far away. But I had no money, no plan, and no strength left to run. There was one night in particular that tested me the hardest. My car had broken down temporarily after overheating, and I had to push it into a side street. I sat there, sweating and exhausted, and a man walked by. He was rough around the edges, with a sly grin that told me he had seen my situation before. He leaned against my car and said, "Looks like you could use a place to stay. I have a couch. Maybe you can do something for me in return." His words made my stomach churn. For a split second, I thought about it. I thought about sleeping in a real bed, about not having to worry about being cold that night. But then, deep inside, a voice whispered, "No. This is not who you are." I looked at him, my voice shaking, and said, "No, thank you." He laughed and walked away, but I sat in that car trembling, realizing how close I had come to compromising myself out of desperation. That night I cried harder than ever before. I opened my Bible again and read Matthew 6 verse 26, "Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they?" I clutched those words like they were life itself, whispering, "If you feed the birds, Lord, please feed me." And somehow, God did. The very next morning, as I sat outside a food pantry waiting for it to open, an older woman approached me. She had a gentle face, her hair neatly tied back, and she carried a basket of muffins. She looked at me and asked, "Sweetheart, have you eaten today?" I shook my head, embarrassed. She handed me 2 muffins and said, "Eat. God sees you." I could barely swallow my first bite because the tears came so quickly. It was not just the food, it was the reminder that I was not invisible. That small act of kindness felt like heaven itself had touched earth just for me. Over the next few weeks, I began to notice small glimmers of hope like that. A stranger paying for my coffee at McDonald's when my card declined. A library staff member slipping me an encouraging note that said, "Keep going, you are stronger than this." A church member I barely knew pressing a $20 bill into my hand without explanation. But perhaps the most life-changing moment came from that same older woman who had given me the muffins. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. I ran into her again at the food pantry, and she remembered me immediately. "You are still here, aren't you?" she asked softly. I nodded, ashamed. She placed her hand on my arm and said, "Child, do not mistake your waiting season for God's absence. He is closer to you right now than you can even imagine." Her words pierced my heart. That night in my car, I repeated them over and over: "Do not mistake your waiting season for God's absence." I realized then that while I had been asking God to rescue me instantly, perhaps what He was really doing was teaching me to rely on Him in a deeper way. My prayers shifted. Instead of, "Lord, get me out of this," I began to say, "Lord, walk with me through this." I started praying with more honesty. I told God about my anger, my shame, my loneliness. And in return, I felt a peace that made no sense given my circumstances. I still had no job, no home, no clear future, but I had a strange assurance that I was not walking alone. My struggle was far from over. There were still nights when the fear came rushing back, when I felt the ache of hunger, when I longed for the comfort of my old life. But little by little, I began to notice that the flame of faith inside me was growing again. It was no longer a flicker, it was steady. And then, one day, a door began to crack open. It was not a miraculous overnight change, but it was enough to remind me that God was moving, even when I could not see it. This was the turning point. My season of struggle had not ended yet, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer surviving only with my own strength. I was surviving with His. Chapter 3: The Redemption. I never expected how slowly God's restoration would unfold, but I had learned that every moment of waiting had a purpose. After months of surviving in my car, relying on strangers' kindness, and clinging to prayer like it was air, a door finally began to open. It started with a call from a temp agency. They had a short-term assignment at a local office, just a few weeks, but it was a start. I remember walking into that office on the first day, my nerves jittering, my hands clammy. I had never felt so grateful just to sit at a desk, answer phones, and file paperwork. Each small task felt like a victory. For the first time in months, I felt the warmth of accomplishment seep into my bones. God had not forgotten me. Soon, that temporary assignment led to another. A colleague recommended me for a permanent position, and within weeks, I had a steady paycheck again. It was not a six-figure salary or the corner office I had once dreamed of, but it was enough to begin rebuilding. The bigger miracle, though, came in the form of a small, affordable apartment. It was modest, just a one-bedroom unit, but it was clean, warm, and mine. The day I moved in, I sat on the floor with a simple dinner of peanut butter sandwiches and whispered a prayer of thanks. I had a roof over my head. I had food on my table. I had my faith still intact. And I realized something even more profound: I had learned how to survive, how to trust, and how to lean fully on God. The months of struggle had changed me. I no longer feared hardships the way I once did. I had faced desperation, loneliness, and temptation, yet here I was, standing stronger. I began volunteering at the same food pantry that had once helped me. Helping others reminded me that God's blessings are often multiplied when we use them to lift someone else. One Sunday, I attended my church again, sitting quietly in the back pew. The choir was singing, the congregation worshiping, and I felt a surge of gratitude that I had almost forgotten. I thought about those nights in my car, the icy tears, the prayers that seemed unanswered. And I realized that God's answer was never absent, it was always unfolding in His perfect timing. I also began to reconcile with myself. I forgave myself for the moments of doubt, for the fleeting thoughts of despair, for the times I questioned God. And I understood that forgiveness is not just for others, it is for the soul that needs to breathe again. There was one particular moment that brought it all home. I was walking to work early one morning, clutching my Bible, when I saw a young woman sitting on the steps of a closed shop, her head in her hands. I approached her gently and asked if she was okay. She looked up, eyes red from crying, and said she had just lost her job. I handed her a granola bar from my bag and shared a verse with her. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34 verse 18. Her tearful smile reflected my own journey. In that moment, I realized God had used my suffering not just to strengthen me, but to position me to help others walk through their valleys as well. My hardships had not been meaningless, they were preparing me to be a light in someone else's darkness. Looking back, I can see how clearly God's hand was in every step of my life. The months of hunger, the cold nights, the rejections, they were all part of a plan I could not see at the time. And though I had lost my job, my home, and what I thought was hope, I had never truly lost faith. That faith became my anchor, my compass, and my refuge. I want to speak directly to anyone watching this now who may be in their own season of loss. Your trial does not define you. Your circumstances do not determine your future. God is not absent, even when you cannot feel Him. Cling to your faith, pray with honesty, and watch how He begins to restore. Restoration may not happen overnight, and it may look different than you imagined, but it is coming. I also want to remind you that God's love is patient and redemptive. He does not abandon us for our moments of doubt. He walks beside us in the car parks, in the long nights, in the tears that no one sees. When everything else falls away, He remains. My life today is not perfect. I still face challenges, but I face them differently now, with trust, resilience, and a heart grounded in faith. I have a home that I cherish, a job that sustains me, and a church family that nurtures me. Most importantly, I have God, and in Him, I have everything. So, if you are struggling today, know this: keep going. Keep praying. Keep trusting. Even when the world turns its back, God remains faithful. Your valley is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of your testimony. I lost almost everything in the natural, but I gained everything in the spiritual. My job, my home, my hope, all were restored in ways far beyond what I could imagine. And the most valuable lesson I learned? When you cling to faith, no loss is final. Remember Romans 8 verse 28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. Whatever you are facing today, hold on to that promise. God is working, even when you cannot see it. I pray that this story encourages you, uplifts you, and reminds you to never give up. God's faithfulness is real, and He will never leave you, even when everything else seems lost.